This woman thinks I'm very funny, and now you're gonna be funny, so what am I gonna be? I'm gonna be a short, bald guy with glasses who suddenly doesn't seem...
Narrator. It was the show about nothing that changed everything. But behind the laughs, there were lawsuits, betrayals, scandals, and creative battles so intense, Seinfeld almost didn't survive. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 10 shocking secrets you were never supposed to know about one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. Number 1, the real Kramer tried to sue. Cosmo Kramer wasn't just a wild invention. He was based on Larry David's real neighbor, Kenny Kramer. Kenny had the same chaotic energy, the same habit of barging into rooms without knocking, and a knack for absurd schemes. When the show took off, Kenny wasn't thrilled about having his name and likeness used without credit or payment. He threatened to sue. NBC quietly paid him a consulting fee, and Kenny turned the whole thing into Kramer's reality tour, a bus ride poking fun at the show. Larry David called it tacky, until it was so absurd they parodied it in the series as the J. Peterman reality tour. Number 2, George Costanza was a lawsuit waiting to happen. Jason Alexander thought George was just a character, until Larry David told him, "You're playing me." George's paranoia, selfishness, and hair-trigger temper were straight from Larry's own life. Even the name came from Jerry's old friend Mike Costanza, who later sued for $100 million, claiming the character humiliated him. The case was thrown out, but it proved Seinfeld's inspirations were a little too close to reality. Number 3, the pilot flopped hard. Before it was a phenomenon, Seinfeld was almost dead on arrival. The 1989 pilot, The Seinfeld Chronicles, tested terribly. Audiences called it too New York and plotless. NBC wanted to scrap it, but executive Brandon Tartikoff ordered 4 more episodes. That tiny lifeline gave the show time to find its voice. Number 4, Elaine almost didn't exist. Elaine wasn't in the pilot at all. NBC demanded a female lead to avoid a boys' club vibe. Julia Louis-Dreyfus wasn't the network's first choice. They thought she lacked glamour. Larry David vouched for her, and once cast, she quickly became a fan favorite, even outshining Jerry in some episodes. Number 5, the Chinese restaurant ultimatum. When fans list the most quintessential Seinfeld episodes, The Chinese Restaurant, Season 2, Episode 11, almost always makes the cut. Ironically, NBC executives wanted to kill it before it ever reached the air. The episode's premise was bold in its simplicity. Jerry, George, and Elaine arrive at a Chinese restaurant before a movie, only to spend the entire 22 minutes waiting for a table that never comes. There's no B-plot, no costume changes, no location shifts. Just 3 people talking, growing increasingly frustrated, and finding absurdity in the mundane. To Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, this was the perfect embodiment of their show about nothing ethos. It mirrored their real-life conversations and their belief that comedy could spring from everyday irritations. But when they pitched it to NBC, the network's reaction was immediate. "Nothing happens. It's boring. People will change the channel." Executives pushed for rewrites. Add a subplot, show the kitchen, cut away to something fun. Larry refused. He argued that the tension came from the audience sharing the same restless weight as the characters. Every awkward glance at the hostess, every false hope of hearing their name called, was the comedy. When the standoff escalated, Larry dropped a bombshell. "If you cut this, we walk." It was a gutsy move for a show that was still fighting to prove itself. NBC relented, reluctantly agreeing to air the episode as written. The risk paid off. When The Chinese Restaurant aired in May 1991, it became an instant fan favorite. Viewers loved how relatable it was. Everyone had experienced the agony of a long restaurant wait. Critics praised it as a masterclass in dialogue-driven storytelling. Today, the episode is studied in screenwriting courses as proof that tension and humor don't require elaborate setups or constant action. It also cemented Seinfeld's reputation for breaking sitcom rules. In hindsight, it was a turning point. Had NBC forced changes, Seinfeld might have slid into the safe, formulaic patterns of other sitcoms. Instead, it doubled down on its identity, a show that could make nothing into something unforgettable. Number 6, Jerry's controversial relationship. In 1993, Jerry Seinfeld was at the height of his fame. Seinfeld was a cultural juggernaut, dominating NBC's primetime lineup and redefining sitcom comedy. But that year, A personal decision by its star would spark one of the most talked about and quietly controversial chapters in his public life. Jerry, then 39, met Shoshana Lonstein, a 17-year-old high school senior, while strolling through Central Park in New York City. By her own account, she recognized him instantly and struck up a conversation. Soon after, they began dating, a relationship that would last nearly 4 years. The age gap and the fact that Shoshana was still in high school when they met drew criticism, though the media coverage at the time was surprisingly tame compared to how such a story might be received today. Tabloids mentioned the relationship frequently, but often framed it as quirky rather than scandalous, perhaps influenced by Jerry's squeaky clean comedic image. Jerry addressed the controversy in a 1994 Playboy interview, saying, "She's very mature for her age," and emphasizing that nothing inappropriate happened before she turned 18. Legally, their relationship was not considered statutory rape in New York, where the age of consent is 17. But many critics still viewed it as ethically questionable, given the vast difference in life experience and power dynamics. Despite the whispers, the relationship never affected Seinfeld's production or plotlines. The show avoided any reference to it, and the cast refrained from public comment. Behind the scenes, it was simply part of Jerry's personal life, separate from the world of the show. By the late 1990s, the two had gone their separate ways, with Shoshana pursuing a career in fashion design. Jerry later married Jessica Sklar in 1999, and the Lonstein relationship faded from the headlines, though not from public memory. In recent years, as the cultural conversation around age gaps and consent has evolved, the relationship has resurfaced in retrospectives and online discussions about Seinfeld. For some fans, it remains an odd footnote. For others, it's a reminder that even the most beloved entertainers can have personal histories that spark uncomfortable questions. Number 7. Michael Richards' career-ending scandal. When Seinfeld ended in 1998, Michael Richards faced a problem many actors dream of and dread. He had played one of the most iconic sitcom characters of all time. Kramer's explosive entrances, absurd schemes, and oddball physical comedy had made Richards a household name. But the role was so distinctive that it became a cage. Casting directors struggled to see him as anyone other than Kramer. Richards attempted to break free with The Michael Richards Show in 2000, a detective comedy where he played a private investigator. But audiences couldn't separate the character from the actor, and the series was canceled after just a few weeks. Over time, he became more reclusive, avoiding the spotlight and rarely appearing in public. Then, in November 2006, during a stand-up performance at the Laugh Factory in Los Angeles, everything unraveled. Richards was heckled by audience members, and instead of defusing the tension with humor, he exploded, launching into a shocking, racially charged tirade filled with repeated use of the N-word. The outburst was caught on a cell phone camera, and within hours, the grainy footage was on every major news outlet. The backlash was immediate and intense. Fellow comedians, fans, and civil rights leaders condemned the remarks. Richards issued a public apology on The Late Show with David Letterman, a tense and uncomfortable appearance in which Jerry Seinfeld, also a guest that night, told the audience, "Stop laughing. This isn't funny." Despite his remorse, Richards' career never recovered. In interviews years later, he admitted the incident haunted him and that he withdrew from performing almost entirely. His most notable public reappearance came in 2012, when Jerry invited him on Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. The conversation was candid, with Richards expressing regret and acknowledging that the outburst had destroyed his reputation. For a man whose craft was built on making people laugh without saying a word, it was a tragic turn. Kramer had been a character of pure chaos and joy, but that one night overshadowed everything, leaving Michael Richards as one of television's most famous cautionary tales. Number 8. The cast wasn't close off-screen. On-screen, the Seinfeld foursome seemed inseparable, finishing each other's sentences, sharing inside jokes, and navigating absurd situations like a dysfunctional but unbreakable family. But once the cameras stopped rolling, the reality was far less cozy. Julia Louis-Dreyfus has openly said that the cast members weren't hang-out-after-work friends. They respected one another's talent, but when a scene wrapped, they often retreated into their own worlds. Michael Richards, who played Kramer, was particularly private. He skipped most press appearances, avoided group interviews, and preferred spending time alone rather than attending cast dinners or post-filming get-togethers. Jerry Seinfeld and Jason Alexander occasionally butted heads over creative matters. Jason, trained in theater and deeply protective of George Costanza, could be outspoken when he felt scripts sidelined his character. In fact, during season 3, Alexander famously confronted Larry David after being excluded from an episode, warning that he would quit if it happened again. The issue was resolved, but moments like that reinforced the professional, rather than personal nature of their bond. There were no holiday trips together, no big shared vacations, no friends, style group hugs when the cameras weren't rolling. Even the show's wrap party for the finale carried a slightly formal tone. It wasn't animosity, just a mutual understanding that their relationship existed in the context of work. Ironically, this emotional distance mirrored the tone of Seinfeld itself. The show prided itself on being the no-hugging, no-learning sitcom, a world where friendship was transactional and sentimentality was undercut by sarcasm. In that way, their real-life detachment may have actually fueled the authenticity of their performances. When the cast reunited for events years later, including Julia's guest arc on Curb Your Enthusiasm and Jerry's comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, the interactions were warm, but still carried the air of old colleagues catching up, rather than lifelong friends reminiscing. It's a reminder that some of the most convincing on-screen chemistry in TV history didn't come from real-life intimacy. It came from 4 actors who knew their roles, respected their craft, and understood how to make magic when the director yelled action. Number 9, the $110 million offer Jerry refused. When Seinfeld reached the end of its 9th season in 1998, it wasn't just another sitcom signing off. It was the #1 show on television, pulling in staggering ratings and generating hundreds of millions in syndication deals. NBC executives were desperate to keep the juggernaut alive for just one more year. So they made Jerry Seinfeld an offer so massive it made industry headlines: $110 million for one more season. That worked out to roughly $5 million per episode, an unheard of figure at the time, one that would have made him the highest paid actor in television history by a wide margin. To NBC, it was a no-brainer. Fans were still tuning in record numbers, advertisers were paying top dollar, and critics agreed the show hadn't lost its edge. From a business standpoint, another season was free money. But Jerry didn't see it that way. For him, the timing was everything. "You don't want to stay at the party too long," he later explained in interviews. He feared that one more season might push the show past its creative peak, risking the perfect streak of quality and audience goodwill they had built over nearly a decade. Larry David, who had left the show after season 7 but returned to write the finale, backed Jerry's call completely. He called it the ultimate creative power move, walking away at the top before the audience had a chance to stop laughing. It wasn't an easy choice. The cast had mixed feelings. $110 million is hard to turn down, and many shows dream of just 1/10 of Seinfeld's popularity. But in the end, Jerry's decision preserved the show's legacy. Today, it's hard to argue with the results. Seinfeld remains one of the few long-running sitcoms without a bad final season. In syndication, it still earns hundreds of millions annually, and Jerry's personal net worth has soared to around $1.1 billion, without compromising the show's creative reputation. It's a rare case in Hollywood where someone didn't take the money and ended up richer for it, both financially and in legacy. Number 10, No Soup for You, was improvised. The Soup Nazi episode, officially titled The Soup Nazi, Season 7, Episode 6, first aired on November 2nd, 1995, and instantly became one of Seinfeld's most celebrated moments. It introduced viewers to Yev Kassim, a stern soup vendor with a strict ordering protocol. Mess it up, and you're cut off. The role was played by Larry Thomas, a relatively unknown actor at the time. Thomas had just a few days to prepare for the part, but he took it seriously. He studied footage of real drill sergeants, noting their clipped speech and controlled body language, and combined it with a kind of old-world formality. The character was inspired by a real New York soup vendor, Al Yagana, famous for his incredible recipes and his equally infamous temper. People in Manhattan knew that if you didn't order exactly as instructed, you'd be sent to the back of the line. Larry David had visited the real shop and been on the receiving end of Yagana's cold stare, and he knew it belonged in the show. But here's where the magic happened. The now legendary line, "No soup for you," wasn't in the original script in its final form. In rehearsal, Larry Thomas sharpened the delivery, hitting each word like a gavel. Short, sharp, and final. The crew erupted in laughter. Jerry Seinfeld himself had to bite his lip to keep from ruining takes. The writers immediately adjusted the scene to preserve that exact delivery. When the episode aired, it was an instant hit. The phrase entered pop culture overnight. Fans repeated it in offices, in restaurants, even to strangers in line. The real Al Yagana was furious. He felt the portrayal mocked him, but the notoriety brought huge business to his shop. Years later, the Soup Nazi was ranked among TV Guide's top 100 episodes of all time. Larry Thomas still gets recognized for the role and has reprised it at fan conventions, food festivals, and even in commercials. It's a perfect example of how Seinfeld thrived on accidents and improvisations. One actor's inspired delivery transformed a funny side character into a cultural phenomenon, proving once again that sometimes, in comedy, the smallest changes create the biggest legacies. And in Seinfeld's case, a show that prided itself on being about nothing ended up giving us everything, including a line that will be repeated for generations to come.